Give everyone just another moment to get settled, and then we're going to get started. It's 10:30, so. I was trying to politely say get in your chair.
I heard you very politely. And you're the lady with the timer.
I'm the lady with the timer. Let's see how well you guys can evaluate. Let's see if I lose my mind.
I'm usually the lady with the timer, so I'm sure you'll be fine.
Everyone gets settled. I'll go ahead and get started with my little spiel. So I am Ashley Fick. I am the Civic Engagement Librarian for Johnson County Library. Thank you so much for being here on a Saturday morning when it would have been easier maybe to stay in bed with the rain. We appreciate you taking time out to do your civic duty. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. We will open with 3 minutes for each legislator to talk about whatever it is they think is important going on in Topeka, their committee work, whatever it is they want to share with you. And then we will move into your audience questions. You can submit those on the note cards on your chair, or if you're online, via the online form in the description of the video. We will ask those in order of most asked questions or questions that apply to the most people. So if you ask a question about the park next door, we may not be able to get to that if we don't have enough time. So I apologize. I also have some follow-up sheets on your chair. If you hear something that you want to follow up on today, I encourage you to do that. You have the contact information for all the legislators sitting here with me, as well as the ones that attended all of the legislative coffees. Also, one last detail, please do not shout out. It helps us get to the most questions possible. Also, please refrain from clapping and definitely refrain from booing. And so I'm sure that would never happen here, but thank you so much. And also, I just want to leave us with 95% of Americans agree that mutual respect is the way, a path forward to a more functional government. And we don't agree on hardly anything, but we can agree on that. So I would like this to be an example of that today. So with that, would you like to get started?
Sure, I can do that. And this is on. Hi, I'm Allison Hougland. I represent House District 15, and I believe I border with both of you guys. So I represent Old Olathe, and being Old Olathe myself, I was actually born there. I really appreciate the district that I'm representing. I am on legislative modernization as a committee, welfare reform, child welfare and foster care, and elections, which might pertain to this group. So the elections committee is moving forward. We moved forward the getting rid of the 3 days after election day for the votes to come in by mail. I did not vote for that bill, but we did pass that bill out of committee. I believe this week we're going to be hearing about ballot boxes and how they're a bad idea. I disagree with that assessment. On welfare reform, the most recent thing we heard was about criminalizing homelessness. I am against that. I feel like housing first is the way to handle homelessness. On child welfare, we're going to be hearing again about able-bodied people with adults without dependents is what it's about. And there is a federal law that associates to everybody 18 to 49. So what we are looking at doing in that is extending that from 49 to include the group of 50 to 59. So that would mean people that are 50 years old and are not working 30 hours a week, they would be enrolled basically in work training. Although a lot of people don't have control over whether they're working 20 to 30 hours a week, things can change by the person that's doing the scheduling. Anyway, it's a big thing. And then legislative modernization, we've heard a lot. We've thought about a lot. We're going to start breaking into groups and doing something about it, which is going to be exciting. From what I understand, every legislator and every judge receives a full book of the Kansas statutes every year. And that seems like a lot, because when I moved in, I moved a set off the bookcase and put my set on. So I think we can probably reduce that and just save some money. And that is all. Look at that.
Is it on? My name is John Resman. I represent the 121st District, which runs along K7, west of K7, south of K10, and north of 159th Street, all the way to County Line. I serve on 3 committees, Federal and State Affairs, Corrections and Juvenile Justice, and I'm Vice Chair for Transportation and Public Safety Budget. And I also serve on the interim committee for Corrections and Juvenile Justice. I submitted 2 bills this session. The first one has to do actually with Representative Epley. It's the end-of-life visitation. And because of COVID, there were many people that couldn't visit their loved ones in the hospital or nursing home because of COVID, and a lot of them died alone. And myself and Representative Epley submitted a bill, and it passed out of committee in the House, and now it's sitting in the Senate, which will allow visitation at the end of life in those institutions. The other bill that I submitted with is with Carl Turner from Leawood. He and I got together and submitted a bill where it's a tax bill, which is not exactly my forte, but if you trade in a car and you get the value of that car and you pay the tax difference between the value of that car and the value the price of the car that you're purchasing. Well, if you sell a car privately, you don't get that tax benefit. So this bill will, and it just passed the House this week, where you can sell your car privately, you can take that money and you can apply it towards a down payment, and you only pay the tax difference in the amount that you put down and the value of the car. So you're not paying as much in taxes. So it's a tax break for the consumer, and it probably will spur car sales because people will now be able to get that tax break. In some of the committees that I serve on, we passed out of the House and out of the committee in corrections increased penalties for battery on hospital workers. We've got a lot of complaints where hospital workers are being battered by patients, people that visit them, and so they asked for a bill, and it's now sitting in the Senate. We also passed a bill in corrections, and it's in the House, and it's a crime of human smuggling. We have a bill that's human trafficking, but human smuggling is when somebody voluntarily goes with a person who is going to smuggle them either in the country or across the United States. I know fentanyl is a big issue right now. We've had a bill that has passed the House, and it's increased the penalties for manufacturing fentanyl, and it's part of the special sentencing rules that we have, and there's 48 rules involving that, and it's automatic presumptive imprisonment if you're manufacturing fentanyl inside the state of Kansas. So that's something that we can do at the state level, and hopefully at the federal level they'll be able to stop the fentanyl coming across the border. And with that, I'll have to pass it on.
Am I on? All right. I'm Bill Sutton. I represent the 43rd District, of which you are sitting smack dab in the middle. So welcome to the 43rd District. I've been in the legislature. This is my 11th year. I have a number of committees that I'm a part of. Start out with appropriations in the morning. That's where all of the spending is approved or disapproved. The next committee is Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development. And then I chair the Insurance Committee. That pretty much fills up my time. But then we have the interim committees in addition. I chair the The Joint Committee on State Building Construction. It's kind of a mouthful. Doesn't meet real often, but when we do, it's pretty important stuff that we're dealing with. Right now, as a matter of fact, we're dealing with a building right across the street from the Capitol that's being torn down and rebuilt back up. So it's a question of, is it a refurbish or is it a rebuild? Sometimes there's a little bit of a gray line between those two, since the power plant is sitting. The power plant for the entire state complex is in the basement of that building. So this is kind of it's the docking building, if you're familiar with the area. It's kind of a neat project that we're working on there. Also serve on the Joint Committee on State Employee and Board Member Compensation. A little bit specialized on that one, but that's also very fascinating work. And the Joint Committee on Rules and Regulations. Probably the driest committee on earth, but bear with me, it is dry, yes, no doubt about it. But if you really want to know how government works, that is a fantastic place to sit, because we can pass here I am popping my peas into the microphone, that's lovely. We can pass legislation saying anything that gets 63, 21 and 1. However, how that is implemented by the agencies is based on their rules and regulations. So, for example, we had a midwifery bill that we passed 7 years ago. This year got their rules and regulations in place to actually implement the bill that we passed 7 years ago. There'd been a lot of foot dragging, a lot of bickering back and forth between a couple of different agencies, and it just goes to show you really how this works when the rubber meets the road. Anyway, down to 30 seconds. I didn't time it as well as the others, but I'm pretty close. So thanks for being here.
All right. Our first question, also, if you have a question that we haven't been by to collect, just hold it up and somebody will be by to grab it. Why all the proposed legislation on voucher type programs diverting public funds to private schools when they do not benefit most students in Kansas? No geographic access or can't pay full costs, and when private schools do not have to meet the state's accountability standards. Anyone want to grab that one?
I honestly have the same question myself. So next.
We'll take it. It's not in any of my committees.
Sorry, but I don't have an answer for that either. I'm not on education, so I don't know why there are so many bills that are coming forward and who is introducing those.
Yeah, as far as the number of bills, I'm unaware of that as well. There is one that came out of the House and one that came out of the Senate. Those are the only ones that I know about. And as far as I know, the one out of the House did get to it did pass out of committee, but then it got referred back to committee. I guess there was some more work that needed to be done. So I can't even, there were no vouchers though in that one. There were educational savings accounts, which some could probably argue are similar. But although there is a neat economic process that goes into play with an ESA rather than a voucher, but we can get into that later. But yeah, as far as how many there are, I only know of those two, and one of them that was on the floor, or that was going to be on the floor, got referred back to committee. So I can't really tell you even what's in that bill right now until it comes back out to the floor.
What is your position on the proposed flat tax and why?
I don't want to hog the mic. I'm gonna dish the rest of these off to you guys though. The proposed flat tax right now, I don't see it happening. I love the idea. Don't get me wrong. I think it would be egalitarian in nature for everyone to be paying the same tax rate. I don't see it happening because it's going to be expensive. And if you've looked at the budget numbers as they've developed throughout the course of the year, and with the new spending that's been proposed predominantly through our social services budgets, along with our economic development with our Apex 1, 2, and now conceptually Apex 3, I don't see an ending balance that's going to support a flat tax. I don't see how it can happen. If the social services budget got serious about actually cutting their growth, and I don't mean cutting spending, I mean just cutting the growth, then it could maybe be a possibility. But right now, I don't see it happening. I think Apex 3 is dead in the water for exactly the same reason. The money's not going to be there.
I'll go next. I see the flat tax as a really bad idea. People that have the least least ability to pay will be asked to pay the same amount as those with the most ability to pay. It actually shifts the burden of taxes onto the middle class, which is already shrinking. And then it would most likely put the state into default again. So we're just to the point where we're building our resources back up. We need to stay on that path, and a flat tax would definitely undo everything that's been done.
I hate to say, keep on saying this, but I'm not on tax committee either, but so it's kind of difficult to really know if you have an opinion, because once a bill gets entered into a committee, it could be amended to death, and then it comes out differently than when it went in. So it's kind of hard to say what your opinion is of a bill, before it actually comes out and hits the floor. So it's kind of difficult to give an opinion.
This person wants to thank you for meeting with your constituents. Also, their question, why are our tax dollars leaving the state when we could be using them to help our citizens, hospitals, and our economy by expanding Medicaid?
I would love to see the expansion of Medicaid. We don't have the votes for it in the House. As a member of the superminority, my vote would be with you, but it would help. I'm on the foster care committee. It would help a great deal in foster care. It would help with child welfare. It would help with welfare reform. It would help so many people in our community, including veterans and children. So I don't have an answer of why we haven't done it.
I beg a little difference on the veterans end of it. Being a veteran myself, you always have the VA that you can go to. And I don't believe Medicaid expansion covers anything that the VA does. So do they?
7,000 veterans.
Okay, but that's because, are they going to the VA?
I don't know what the specifics about.
Yeah, so I think that the veterans can go to the VA for services. That's which I could use myself, but I don't have to.
We've got waiting lists for a variety of services, medical waivers, IDD waivers, and so forth, aging disability waivers that are 7 to 8 years long right now. 10 years? Okay, thanks. Yeah, 10 years long. So in answer to that, we're going to put more people on the list. We're going to expand it to cover more people. That's not going to serve those who aren't being served right now. That's going to push them further back down the line. I'm not going to support any Medicaid expansion until we can get those waiver lists cleared up. Then we can talk. Then we can actually look at the finances and see what happens. But until we're serving the underserved now, I'm not going to add more to the list of underserved. It's ridiculous.
What was your reason for voting the way you did on House Bill 2269, raising the legal age for tobacco products to 21?
I support it because it actually follows along with the federal mandate and puts us in line with the federal government. And as an ex-smoker, I think it's a great idea to start later rather than earlier. And it was hard to quit.
I didn't vote for the bill. If the federal law is 21, the store or wherever they're selling tobacco products is already going to abide by the law. It was a bill that we passed that probably wasn't really needed. If someone's 18, they can vote, they can serve in the military, they can die for their country, they can be sued, they can sue somebody, they can buy a home, they can take out a loan. If they want to smoke cigarettes at 18, I mean, that's up to them. But it's already at 21 at the federal level, so the law is already there.
Kind of going to echo that one. I also did not support it. By the way, 68 days tobacco-free right now, by the way. So if I get a little twitchy and manic, understand. No, really all I'm doing right now is cotton mouth. That's about the only thing that I have. I will be drinking the water as well as the coffee. No, I voted against the bill, and for exactly the same reason that John said. The laws are already on the books. The issue that I have, though, is that we can't seem to decide what's an adult. We say you can drive a car at 16. You can register to vote at 18. Some people want to drop that to 16. We want to, let's see, you can enlist in the military at 18. You can buy a rifle at 18. You can buy a pistol at 21. You can drink alcohol at 21. You can buy cigarettes at 21. You can be tried as an adult for a crime anywhere from 12 up. And then we get the argument that the human brain isn't actually fully matured until 25. Okay, what gives, folks? What's an adult? I voted against this because first off, like John said, it was unnecessary, but it's also just throwing a dart at a number and pretending like that's adult at this level. What I think would be most beneficial would just pick a number. I don't care what it is. Well, okay, within reason, I don't care what it is. But 18, 21, 25, whatever we want to say, what is an adult? Let's call that person an adult, rather than just making up laws here and there randomly in a patchwork of definitions.
Why has the sales tax on food not been completely eliminated?
That's a good question. There's a plan. Are you talking about all the way down to zero, including the cities? Is that part of the question, or just the state portion?
It doesn't clarify, but it does say completely eliminated. So I would presume that does include some of the local taxes as well.
Okay. Well, we passed the sales tax, or reduction of sales tax on food last year, and it's to bring down the sales tax incrementally. So we're not taking it all at one time. The state portion will be a loss of about $500 million when it finally goes down to 4% with the state portion. So it will affect our budget. So we can see how it comes down slowly to see the effect it will have on our budget. As far as going all the way down to zero, I grew up in New Jersey where sales tax on food is at zero. And I can tell you, they shifted the sales tax on food to property tax. If you think your property tax is high right now, you just wait until if they've eliminated to 100% down to zero. That is going to go from sales tax on food to your property tax. And I've already talked to the city of Olathe and Lenexa, and according to the city of Olathe, it'll go up 5 mills in Olathe and about 4 mills in Lenexa. So your property tax will definitely go up a lot higher. So bringing it down slowly, it actually helps the state figure out where it affects our budget the most. And like I said, in the very end, when we lose the 6.5%, we will lose $500 million a year on our budget. So it's important just to bring it down slowly.
Yeah, I haven't even seen the bill yet. So I'm sure it's floating around out there. There's a whole bunch of them floating around that I haven't been privy to yet because they're still tied up in committee. John's right, though. We don't have the authority. First off, in my opinion, we could try it, but I don't think we have the authority to eliminate the sales tax for counties and cities. We could give it a try. I think we'd end up in court on that, and I'm pretty sure we'd lose. But I find that I don't see that as a real option, and for exactly the same reason that they're going to make that money somewhere. They're going to need to operate somehow. The money's going to have to come from somewhere, and it's going to be your property taxes. And based on the emails I get, that's a touchy subject. Start raising property taxes even further. I don't think that's going to go over real well. So why is it not gone? Because we don't have the authority, and it would be a nightmare for your property taxes. As far as the state portion of it, if that's what the question was asking, was the state portion, the key to successful budgeting, and this involves expenditures as well as reductions. The key is to have a smooth line. Anybody who's been involved in accounting or budgeting knows that jagged lines do a couple of things. First off, you don't know how jagged it's going to get. You don't know how far it's going to fall, your revenue or your expense. You don't know. And so you can't plan for it effectively. And secondly, no one who's suffering the effects or receiving the results can plan accordingly. And one thing that is most necessary, you'll see this, even California has a lot of business, even though they have massive taxes. Why is that? Because it's predictable. Businesses know what's coming down the line. They know basically what to expect. There could be little fluctuations, but it's predictable. We've got to keep our budgeting predictable. When the lines get jagged, people get scared, people run away. People don't start businesses here because they don't know what they can expect. It's vital to keep smooth lines in your accounting, in your budgeting, and in your tax revenue.
I know that I and my opponent both campaigned on stopping the food tax immediately. And I feel like the number is a known number because it's shown on the balance sheet of how much money comes in as food tax. So I don't really feel like it's an unknown. The idea of the state doing away with taxes for the county and the city, I feel is a really bad idea because they'll have to make up the money somehow. And like you said, property taxes is where it would probably go. I think I got a new timer. I could probably do that. But as far as property taxes go, we actually have a 3-point plan to reduce property taxes. I've signed on to 3 different bills. One of them would actually take a vote of every Kansan, which would be to reduce the mill levy from 11.5% to 9%. And then there's a local ad valorem tax relief fund that is part of Kansas law that has not been funded for at least 20 years. We just everybody says, okay, we're not going to do it again. We're not going to do it again. That is money that would go to cities and counties for their local taxes. So it'd be a little bit of an offset from the state. The other part of the plan would be, I guess recently, I wasn't part of it because I just got here. We changed the part of your property taxes that aren't taxed from $20,000 to $40,000. The first 20, and now the first $40,000 of your property is not actually taxed. We're looking at raising that to $65,000. So that's going to help the people that met me at the door saying, how do I keep my mom in her house? I am getting totally taxed out of living here. Where am I supposed to go? So I really feel like we can do something about the property tax, and we just need to have those bills heard. Thank you.
I'm going to tack onto this because a couple of you mentioned this. What would you do to lower taxes assessed on residential property?
I just said it.
Yeah, I don't have a great deal of argument against that plan at all. The one thing that I would want to keep in mind, because everything is Not everything's quite black and white at all times. The one thing that I'd want to keep in mind on that is that as we're increasing the amount that's not taxed, that on a state level, no problem. No problem. We'll suck it up, and that'll be the budget prediction, and off we go. Cities and counties, however, also make their money off of property taxes, much more so than the state, certainly, and much more so than they do sales taxes. And so I'd be very concerned if we're reducing their revenue base as to what's going to happen for their budgeting. The first expectation that comes to my mind, and I haven't really had a chance to chew on this for very long, but the first expectation that comes to my mind is that the mill levies would go up. I would have to think so. It's a policy decision. Is that what we want to do? It would make the increase in the amount that's not taxed basically irrelevant because your mill levy would go up for the remaining that was taxed. So unless your house was right at $65,000 in value, probably isn't going to have the effect that you're hoping that it would have. We have tried a number of ways, a number of times over the years to put a lid on property tax. In fact, one of them was called a property tax lid. That didn't work nearly as well as we had hoped that it would because there was no flexibility in it. Some cities and counties with rapid growth needed more funding, needed to be able to access funding from the new developments in town. They couldn't do that with our property tax lid, so we had to start perforating for various and sundry reasons this property tax lid until it became absolutely useless and achieved nothing. Pretty disappointed in that one, to tell you the truth. A couple of years ago, we passed the Truth in Taxation, where we said if you increase your spending, then you have to take a public vote to do so, whether or not your mill levy is going up. I haven't seen the results from that, but at least we are having hearings and votes on the property tax increases, but apparently they're still going up based, again, on the emails that I'm receiving. That also doesn't look to have been particularly effective, even though it is more transparent. So it's got that going for it anyway.
If I may. So when the current property tax schedule was put in place in 1970-something, the percent of the budget that came into the state, the percent of property tax was 35% of the budget. Right now it's over 50%. So I really don't feel like the structure that was put in place back then meant to put 50% of the budget on property tax. I think that property values, I'm a realtor, I help people get money for their homes. I think property values have gone up way faster than anyone expected, and that just puts the burden of taxes primarily on the property owners of Kansas.
Is there, or can there be, a plan to fully fund special education and public schools without it attaching it to a controversial voucher or scholarship bill?
I would like to think so.
I kind of have to agree. I heard about this just the other day from a lobbyist from the elected school district. Prior to that, I didn't even know about the bill. So it's a complicated bill, I think. I don't know if is it coming to the floor? No, I'm not on education, so is it? I don't even. I'm sure. Oh, well, maybe not. Yeah. So yeah, I would like to see divided into three, but I don't like when they lump three things together and you like one thing and don't like the other two, or vice versa. So it makes voting very difficult, and it makes it very difficult to explain why you voted a certain way. But yeah, right now I'm not particularly in favor of that bill.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I'll just grab the microphone. I agree with that. I would prefer that we always separated things out. That way you can tell exactly what I'm voting for and what I'm voting against. I kind of prefer that. But the special education funding, though, is a neat puzzle that we had never really gotten into this one. It turns out, I'm gonna be pushing you 3 minutes on this one, I'm afraid. But it turns out that special education hasn't been fully funded for 11 years. Okay, got it. The formula that we're operating on for special education was put in place how many years ago? Somebody guess. 11 years ago. Yeah, exactly. So special education has not been funded per the formula that we passed in 2012 since 2012, inclusive. So we got, obviously, something needs to be fixed there. And so there's been some digging into that this year, and it's kind of interesting because when you look, okay, here in Gardner and actually all of Johnson County, drastically underfunded, all right? Gardner is something like 64%, 66% funded. One of the schools, Olathe maybe, it might be Olathe, was at 55%.
We're 20 million in the hole from
Yeah,
special ed.
exactly. It was 110 million overall statewide. All right. However, okay, put that aside, keep in mind, underfunded, Johnson County. The major schools, as a matter of fact, the bigger school districts, Wichita included, underfunded in special education. Go over to smaller schools, 200, 300% funded. Okay, something's wrong. I mean, we obviously know that, and it's obviously formulaic, but also what's being attributed to spending for special education. Not defined in statute, so it's kind of a gray area, gets played with by various administrations. So some school districts are putting the cost of construction amortized for what's used for special education into their special education funding and getting reimbursed for it. Okay, whether I agree or not is irrelevant because it's not defined in law. They can do it. Some are putting their teacher salaries, which to me seems fully appropriate. Some are amortizing their utility rates, all right, based on how much is spent for special education. The net result is it's a hodgepodge. We don't have the definitions in place, and we're working this year finally to get something on the books so we know what is an acceptable expense that needs to be reimbursed, what is not, and what is the dollar amount that needs to be appropriated in order to make it happen. And then, but wait, there's more. How do we make sure that the small districts and the big districts are both being fully funded? Complicated question. Oh, well, yeah. I've got the stop sign. You go on the fence.
Can I just chime in real quick?
Give you a minute.
We passed a House resolution a couple weeks ago, and I don't know the figure but apparently the federal government isn't fully funding special education in Kansas. So it's a huge problem. Everybody wants it, but nobody wants to cough up the money to fund it. So we've sent our resolution to Washington to let them know that we're not happy with them not funding, but we should, before we point fingers, we ought to take care of our own business first.
So tacking on to education questions. Do you support expanding school vouchers?
I do not. I feel like the vouchers are, they're taking money away from public education. Public education is why people move to Kansas. It's why people live here, is because we do a good job of educating our students. The argument that our schools are failing is simply incorrect. Our schools are doing a great job. And there's no proof or evidence that public schools or private schools do a better job of educating children than public schools. So those arguments are of no use, and it would really devastate public education.
Yeah, I tell you the truth, I really haven't thought about it much, but I do kind of lean towards vouchers for the simple fact is that parents should have the ultimate right to decide what's best for their children as far as education, whether it's for them to remain in public schools, private schools, or homeschooling. So I kind of lean towards vouchers, but I'm not totally committed towards it.
All right. This first sentence is going to surprise some of you. I am adamantly opposed to vouchers. I am for parental choice, however, so don't start running with that headline just yet. But vouchers economically are not going to do what we hope that they would do. All right. So say, for example, and Senate Bill 83 has, I think, $5,000 of the $17,000 that we spend for education per child. $5,000 of it allocated to a educational savings account. Now, had that been a voucher, this parent gets $5,000. You get to go spend it wherever you want, whatever educational institution you want to use for your child, go do it. All right, the net effect on that, the private schools or the micro schools or whatever pops up for that have a decision to make. Do we expand, all right, like in the case of private schools, do we expand to accept more people because now more people can afford it, or do we raise our tuition? I can't speak for all of them, but I'm going to bet a good chunk raise the tuition, all right? So they keep the same number of students. They're just making more money off of it. And the same students that wanted to transfer out that won't be able to because now the tuition is still placed directly out of reach for them. That's horrible. And that's exactly the opposite of what we want to achieve. And so someone mentioned that educational savings accounts are the same thing. They have a similar effect, but here's the difference. There's a downward economic pressure that's placed on them. All right. So what that means is, if you don't spend that $5,000 in that educational savings account this year, it builds. Say you spent $4,000 and you got $1,000 left over. Okay. The next year you have 5 more, so now you spend 4. You're building up money that can be used for higher education down the road. There's a downward pressure on the tuition prices so that parents who choose to do so can save money toward college for that student. Not bad. That, to me, looks like a very nice idea. Now, there are a couple of statements that were made that I want to clarify. If we make the claim that vouchers or ESAs, what have you, will crush public education, what you're saying is that if parents have a choice, they would not choose our public institutions. I don't believe that to be true. I think that some won't because they know what's best for their student, their child. Oh, here I run up against the stop sign. I run them in real life too, by the way. But anyway, I'll come back to this later. I have a feeling there'll probably be more questions about it.
What are your views on the anti-trans legislation happening during this legislative session?
I don't think any bills come forward. I think there's one in Fed and state, but it hasn't had a hearing. And as far as I know, no bill has come forward or come out of a committee. So as far as right now, it's just stalled.
There was one. And it fell under the heading for the headlines as anti-trans, but in reality, it was saying that women participate in women's sports, men participate in men's sports, and and so that earned the moniker of anti-trans. The way I think about that anyway, is that if a woman were competing, a girl were competing in a girls' sport, track, what have you, swimming, more appropriately is swimming, I guess, and tested positive for massive doses of testosterone, they would be ruled out. Remember, I'm sure there are jokes here about the Russian weightlifting team, and It was the 80s. Never mind, I'm not going to go into it. But they would be ruled out for having massive amounts of testosterone. If a man were competing in a woman's sport, guess what? They also would have massive levels of testosterone. This was a no-brainer. Women compete in women's sports, men compete in men. And to me, it seems very strange that we even have to have a conversation about something as basic as that.
Apologize, I misheard the question. There is a bill, and it's on its way to the governor, isn't it?
Well, it passed the House. I don't know if it passed the Senate.
I think it did. I think I read this morning's paper where it's on its way to the governor. So we'll see how she signs it.
So as far as men competing in women's sports, trans women are women. So I think that is what happened with people being upset with Laura Kelly about saying that she's not, I don't remember how all that worked out. But anyway, people are not changing who they are in order to compete in high school sports or middle school sports or, Little League. People are just being who they are, and I feel they should be allowed to be who they are.
What can be done to counter inflation on the state level?
Anybody got an answer on that?
I don't have a clue.
I feel like reducing property tax will help some. Reducing property tax is going to help people, and it won't help inflation, but it will give them more of their own money back.
I have to agree. I don't think at state level there's really much we can do. There are a lot of things that are out of our control. And if you just seen yesterday, a bank in California, I guess for lack of a better word, defaulted. It's been taken over by the FDIC. Those are things that we can't control. We can't control interest rates. We can't control federal spending, which causes part of the problem. So it's really beyond our reach to really do anything.
Yeah, I would have to agree. This is much more of a macro problem than we're going to conquer from a state level. When you have too much money chasing too few of goods, there are really only two ways out of that. We see the Fed trying to operate on one end of the equation by increasing interest rates, takes money out of the equation, sends it to banks, oddly enough. Never mind, I'm not going to get into that one. But the other option is to increase goods. That's the one that worked in the 80s far more effectively. But from a state level, I don't see a way truly to implement something that would have enough of an impact in an economy the size of Kansas to steer the nation. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to punt on this one and say that one we're going to have to handle on a macro level, not on a state level.
A recent poll by Global Strategy Group found that 70% of Kansans support making voting easier rather than adding additional restrictions. What is your position?
I am on the election committee, and I also have been a pro-voter rights person for years and years before I ever thought about running for office. So anything that we can do to make it easier to vote and not more difficult brings in everyone's voice. And I think restricting voices and restricting votes is a horrible idea. So we're getting ready to talk about the ballot drop boxes. They may have passed that out of committee without me. Not certain. If not, they're about to. Ballot drop boxes allow people to vote on their own time frame. If they've requested a mail-in ballot, they're safe. They're supervised, sort of. Most of them have a camera on it. Is there one out here? Okay. Yeah, there's probably a camera on that. People are concerned about ballot harvesting. I've not heard of any ballot harvesting in Kansas. I think any one of us would, I can't do it anymore, but if somebody needs help getting their vote put in the box, I've signed the line before to help somebody get that done because they weren't driving or they weren't able to get out to do that. But that was one ballot, not the thousands that people are concerned about. Absolutely anything we can do. I think you should just be registered to vote at 18, whether you want to be or not. And it should happen in high school. It should be everywhere. It should be rampant. Everyone should vote. And I thank all of you that do, because I'm assuming everyone in this room has voted. So that's my take on it.
I have to agree on the ballot boxes. I like ballot boxes. I think it makes it easy to vote. And if we can have ballot boxes, then we can make them secure. It's just a matter of us taking the initiative to do that. As far as voting early, I mean, Kansas does make it relatively easy. You have 2 weeks before, the day of, and you can vote by mail. Ballot harvesting, we passed where I think it's 2 years ago or 3 years ago where you can only do 2 years. 10, you can only submit 10 ballots. And what really brought that to the forefront was that there was an election in a small city out west where a representative was running, lost the election, came in the next day and came in with 300 ballots. And every one of those ballots, as far as from what I've heard, is that they voted for him. So there's the reason for the 10 ballots is to keep the elections as honest as possible. Fortunately, that representative is no longer in the House. He was voted out the next time around. The citizens of his, I guess, district didn't like what happened. So that's the reason behind the number of 10. As far as, like I said, as far as ballot boxes, I think they're a good idea. You can vote anytime you want, drop them off, and if we can have them, we can make them secure.
Well, I've got not much more to chime in on that one. I would agree that so long as they're kept secure, an argument can be made for ballot drop boxes. It's when they're not secure that there could be some pushback. We've had cases where there were cameras on them that weren't actually on. We've had cameras on that weren't being monitored. So some of those things we really need to polish up. If we want to keep this thing going, if we want to keep them active for our elections, then let's make sure we treat them seriously, because I don't think we have too many civic responsibilities that are more serious than voting. And to treat it as I'm just going to drop this in a box at random with no one looking, no one monitoring, no one checking to make sure that this is a legitimate vote by one person, not by 300, then I think we really need to let's treat voting as the serious event that it really is. And if we're going to have ballot drop boxes, fine, let's monitor them, just like we monitor our polling places, to make sure that everything's going according to plan, according to the rule of law.
What are you doing to reduce the backlog of persons waiting for Medicaid?
Everything I can. I mean,
Okay, last time, I'm going to put the microphone down after this one, all right? Last time. I had this battle just Wednesday, as a matter of fact, or Tuesday, in appropriations. The Department of, it was KDAD's budget came out, and there was a big expenditure for eliminating the waiting lists. I said, thank God, let's do it, man. I'm on board. Normally in approps, I'm not the guy saying let's spend more money, all right? But this time, with an actual tangible result, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I started getting pushback from other members of the Social Services Budget Committee saying, well, you know, these waiting lists, sometimes people preemptively get on the list because they know they're going to need benefits 7 or 8 years from now. That's why I got 7 or 8 earlier. And you corrected me with 10 years that they're waiting. And that I believe that is correct. But sometimes they just preemptively get on here. So, you know, we're never actually going to have 0 on the waiting list. And that was their answer. And that frustrated, that angered me quite a bit there in committee. I think if you watch the video, you might see that I didn't behave myself quite as appropriately as I should all the time. But to hear that answer frustrated me greatly because there are people that are waiting that need services. And we had the budget, we had the money in the budget to solve the problem, and it got yanked out. And that frustrated me. I'll just say that. That was irritating. Irritating morning in appropriations.
We are getting close to bumping up against time, so I'm going to ask one more question. If we could keep it to 2 minutes each, that would be lovely. Doesn't have a sign.
I can count.
Okay. What is the best way for me to keep up with things being proposed in the legislature so that I may email my opinion to my representative?
There's a website, KS Legislature, is it .gov? .com? .org, of all things. You can see the bills that are coming to each committee, and then you can see the bills by House or by Senate according to the number that they are. So that's the best way. And just keep in touch with us. I actually like hearing from you guys, maybe because I'm new. No. But I think it's important for you to let us know what you're thinking, because how else can we represent you if we don't know what you're about? And things like this. Let us know what you're thinking.
Another way is that when you go on the website, you can go to the House Journal, and it'll show you about 3 days in advance what committees are going to hear what bills. So it'll give you some idea what's coming. It's a short notice, but it will show you about 3 days ahead of schedule. So, and our schedule for our committees usually come out on a Tuesday or Wednesday before we're going to hear a bill, so the week prior. So that's how much notice we get. Unless you're the chair, then you know exactly what's going on. But for the average person, or the average representative, I should say, we know about a week in advance, and you can find out probably about 3 days. Or you can call our administrative assistants and ask them what bills are coming up, because they see our schedule too. So that's another way.
I would say ditto to those answers. That is the best way. I want to take a little exception, though, to the fact that chairmen always know what's going on. That's not true. I've got proponent and opponent schedules to deal
not
with
not being a chairman, I assume that they know everything.
We can kind of guide it, but no, it's not firm at all, because we have proponent and opponents that are sometimes flying in. We have to try to schedule all of this for their schedules. So it's not quite as cut and dried as just, I want to hold this bill hearing today and that's what I'm going to do. It doesn't work quite like that, but we do have a little bit of input on it. I'll grant you that.
I think we are done. Thank you so much to our legislators for attending and taking time out of your Saturday morning. We appreciate it. And thank you to our audience. I'd also like to invite you, we have one more legislative coffee. It's up north at 87th Street in Overland Park at our Central Resource Library. I personally attend every single legislative coffee, and I always learn something. I believe you will too, whether or not your legislator is there. Thank you. And I think I bought way too many donuts, so please feel free to grab some on your way out.